Grant, who was just on that phone?
That is none of your business. Say that again?
The phone was on speaker. She heard that first. Before she saw anything, before she understood anything. Just a voice coming through a door she had not knocked on. A woman's voice. Low. Warm. Familiar in the way that something familiar has no business being. Caroline stood in the corridor. Her hand was still on the door handle. The cream robe she was wearing, the one Grant had picked out, the one she had never particularly liked, fell heavy around her ankles. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. 8 months of a child pressing down on every part of her, and she had gotten up from the sofa in the sitting room because she wanted a glass of water, and she had walked this way out of habit, and she had opened the door without knocking because it was her home. It was supposed to be her home. She stood very still. The voice on the phone said his name. Not Mr. Whitfield. Not Grant in the formal tone his staff used. His name, the way you say a name when you own it, when you have said it so many times in private that it has changed shape in your mouth. Caroline did not move for 4 full seconds. She counted them. Later she would remember counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she stepped into the room. Grant was at the window. His back was to her. His phone was in his hand, held away from his ear, face up, the speaker on. The evening light came through the glass behind him, and for one strange second she saw him the way she had seen him the very first time, strong and certain, and completely at ease inside himself, the way powerful men always are, the way she had found so magnetic in the beginning and had slowly learned to find exhausting. He turned. His face did something. Not guilt, not surprise, something faster and colder than either of those things. His eyes moved across the room. They took in everything, her position in the doorway, the phone in his hand, the sound still coming from it. His expression reorganized itself in about half a second. Not into innocence, into management. He said her name. Just her name. Caroline. Like a period at the end of a sentence. Like a boundary he was drawing with one word. She said, "Who is that?" He ended the call. He crossed the room toward her. She said it again. "Who is that, Grant?" He hit her. Open hand. Full force. The left side of her face. She stumbled. Her shoulder hit the doorframe. Her hands went to her belly, both of them. Fast and instinctive, before she had even registered the pain in her face, before the sound of it had finished bouncing off the high ceilings of the room he had designed to impress other people. Her hands went to her son first. That was the thing she would remember most. Not the slap, not the doorframe, the order of it. Belly before face, Thomas before herself, even in that second, even in that room. The silence after was enormous. She could hear her own breathing. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and specific, a scent she had once associated with safety. She could feel the grain of the painted doorframe against her shoulder. She could taste something metallic. The side of her tongue caught, and then she heard the front door. 3 sets of footsteps in the marble entry hall. She knew them all by sound. She had known them since childhood. The particular weight of Brendan's step, deliberate, evenly spaced. The walk of a man who has learned to enter rooms at exactly the speed that commands attention. Derek's slightly heavier on the left from an old injury he never talked about. Marcus, quieter than either of them, the tread of someone who is always listening. They had said they were coming for dinner. She had forgotten. She had spent all day forgetting small things, because there were so many large things taking up the space where small things used to live. Brendan's voice came around the corner first. "Caroline?" We knocked. The housekeeper let us in, we thought. He stopped. He had come around the doorframe. He was looking at her. His eyes moved from her face to her hand still pressed flat against her belly, and then to the man standing 4 feet behind her. Derek was there a second later. He saw it in 1 second. She watched him see it. She watched his face do the thing it did when Derek Calloway was deciding what to do next. Very still, very quiet. The stillness of someone with a great deal of training and a great deal of restraint and a specific, careful decision being made about which one to use right now. Marcus appeared behind Derek. He looked at his sister. Something moved through his face that she could not name. Something that was grief and fury and calculation all at once, moving fast, settling into quiet. The room did not breathe. Grant said, "This is a private matter." Brendan did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was very quiet. "Say that again," he said, slowly. Grant said, "I am not going to be interrogated in my own." "Say it again," Brendan said, slowly. The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. Derek had already moved, not toward Grant, between Grant and Caroline. He simply stepped into that space with the particular stillness of a man who knows exactly what his body communicates and has decided to let it speak. He did not touch anyone. He did not need to. Marcus went to Caroline. He put his hand on her shoulder. Gentle. Certain. The hand of a younger brother who has known his sister longer than he has known almost anything else. "Come with me," he said quietly. She let him guide her into the hallway. She let herself be guided because her legs had decided they were not entirely trustworthy right now. Because the room behind her was doing something she did not want to be in the middle of. Because Marcus was there. Because Brendan was there. Because Derek was there. Because for the first time in 3 years, she was not alone in this house with him. In the hallway, Marcus sat beside her on the bench near the staircase. She had picked that bench out herself. One of the few things in this house she had actually chosen. She had found it in a small antique shop on a Tuesday morning when Grant was traveling, and she had bought it with her own card, one of the cards, the one he had given her for household expenses. But still, it was her choice, her Tuesday, her bench, and she had loved it because it was worn and particular and had a life before her. She was sitting on it now with her brother's hand over hers. He held her hand without saying anything for a long moment. Then he said, "How long?" She understood the question. She answered it the way she always answered hard questions, by almost not answering it. "It was the first time," she said. Marcus looked at her. She looked at the floor. The floor was marble, white and gray, a specific veining pattern she had looked at 10,000 times and never really chosen. Grant's architect had chosen it. Grant had approved it. She had nodded when they showed her the sample. "It was the first time he hit me," she said. Marcus was quiet. "Then, but not the first time you were afraid of him." It was not a question. She started to cry. Not the kind of crying you do when someone is watching. Not the kind that performs itself. The other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere you have been keeping sealed for such a long time that when it finally opens, you are surprised by how much was in there. She put her free hand over her face. She breathed. In the drawing room behind her, she could hear voices. Controlled, male, reaching for the same air. She had never heard anyone talk to Grant Whitfield the way those voices were talking to him right now. It felt shamefully and specifically like relief. She breathed again. Her son moved inside her. A slow, certain pressure against her ribs. The specific rolling weight of him. She pressed her hand there and felt the warmth of him through the robe she had never liked and thought, I know. Me too. The entry hall was quiet except for those voices. The house smelled the way it always smelled, something expensive and neutral, a scent chosen by someone Grant had hired to make spaces feel impressive. She had stopped noticing it somewhere in year 2. She noticed it now. She noticed a lot of things now. The bench was worn smooth on the right armrest where she had sat before. Just that spot, just the times when she needed to sit somewhere that did not feel like someone else's decision. Marcus said nothing else. He sat beside her. He held her hand. That was enough. That was, she realized, more than she had been given in a very long time. She breathed. She let herself be here, in this hallway, on this bench, with her brother's hand over hers and her son turning slowly inside her and the voices behind the closed door that were, for the first time, not his alone. She breathed. The clock on the landing above them ticked. Outside, the evening had gone fully dark. The lights in the hallway were set to their automatic evening level, warm, orchestrated, one of the smart home systems Grant had been proud of for approximately 3 weeks before it became simply part of the infrastructure of their life. She thought about what she was going to do. She thought, I do not know yet. She thought, but I am thinking about it. I am actually thinking about it. And that is different from before. Before, there had been no thinking. There had only been management. Managing the temperature of his moods, managing the timing of requests, managing the version of herself that was easiest for him to be around. She was so tired of managing, she pressed her hand against her belly. Thomas pushed back, small, certain. Already himself. I know, she thought. I know. From behind the drawing room door, Brendan's voice. Still quiet. Still the voice of a man who does not need to raise it. She closed her eyes, and then Brendan came through the door. He was holding his phone. His face was doing something careful. The face he used in courtrooms, she imagined, though she had never actually seen him in one. The face that meant, I have just heard something, and I am deciding exactly how to use it. He showed Marcus the phone. Marcus's expression changed. It went from grief to something with edges. Brendan said he threatened her, on tape. He said it the way he said everything, without drama, just facts, just the thing itself. He told me that if this leaves this house, he will make sure she loses everything, including custody. Caroline heard that. She heard the word custody. She pressed her hand flat against her belly. I am not crazy, she thought. The thought arrived clean and clear and certain, the way the best truths do. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And now I know what he was already planning. Not tonight. Not in the last hour. He had been planning this. She looked at Brendan. He said that? She asked. He said custody? Brendan said he did. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he has never said that to me directly. Brendan, he said it to me. Which means he was already thinking about it. Which means we need to think about it first. The hallway was very quiet. The clock ticked. She looked at her bench, her small worn bench with its particular history and its right armrest worn smooth by her weight, and her sitting there all the small sad times she needed somewhere to be that felt like her choice. She thought, this is not over tonight. She thought, this is just starting. She thought, good. Derek moved first. He did not touch Grant. He did not have to. He simply stepped between them with the particular economy of a man trained to read threats and respond to them without waste. His body said everything his voice was saving for later. Behind the door, the conversation continued. Caroline did not go back into that room. She stayed in the hallway, and Marcus stayed beside her, and they listened to the particular music of Brendan Calloway conducting a man who had never in his adult life been conducted by anyone. Grant's voice controlled, rising at the edges, looking for the register that usually worked. Brendan's voice, the same temperature throughout. She had heard Grant handle difficult people before. Business rivals, contractors who underperformed, board members who asked questions he did not want to answer. He had a specific way of reshaping a room. His voice would drop. His posture would settle. He would speak more slowly than the other person, and let the slowness do the work of reminding them who had more to lose. It was not working right now. She could hear it not working. Marcus said quietly, "Do you want to go upstairs?" "Not yet," she said. She needed to hear this. She needed to hear what happened when a room did not rearrange itself around Grant Whitfield. A long pause behind the door. Then Grant's voice again, and this time there was something in it she did not recognize immediately. It took her a moment. It was calculation without confidence. He was recalculating, without the certainty that the calculation would land. She thought, I have never heard him sound like that before. She thought, he is actually uncertain. She had not known that was possible. Marcus said, "Tell me what you need." She thought about the question. It was a good question. It was a question she had not been asked in a long time. What do you need? What do you actually need? Not what do you prefer, or what would you like, or what would be easiest. She said, "I need to think." He nodded. "Okay, think." She closed her eyes. She let her mind go back, not to tonight, further. Third date. A restaurant he chose. She had reached for the wine list, which she always did. Because she liked wine, she knew wine. She had spent 2 years of her 20s becoming genuinely knowledgeable about it, just because she found it interesting. He had taken the list gently from her hand and looked at it himself and ordered something and smiled while he did it. A specific smile. The one that meant he was being helpful. The one she had learned to call considerate. She had laughed. She had thought, he just wants to take care of things. Some men are like that. It is a love language. She had filed it under consideration and moved on. She thought about that filing now. She thought about the drawer in her mind where she had been putting things for 3 years. Consideration, stress. He did not mean it that way. He is under a lot of pressure. I am too sensitive. I misread it. I overreacted. The drawer was very full. Brendan came out of the drawing room. He pulled the door closed behind him. He looked at his sister, the way he had been looking at her since she was 7 years old, and came home with a skinned knee she was trying to pretend was not as bad as it was. He always knew. He always saw through the pretending immediately. And then, and this was the important part, he never mentioned the pretending. He just addressed the knee. "Derek is staying in there," Brendan said. "Grant is not leaving until we are ready for him to." "Can he do that?" Caroline asked. "Derek can do a great many things," Brendan said. Marcus said, Legally, we are guests in a home where the occupant has just committed domestic violence in front of witnesses," Brendan said. "We are not leaving. And neither is he, not yet." Caroline heard the phrase, domestic violence. She heard it land. She heard it apply to her, to this house, to this evening, to the last 3 years of her life, and she sat very still with the weight of it. She had never called it that. She had never let herself call it that. She thought, it fits. It fits exactly. "I need a moment," she said. "Take it," Brendan said. She stood. She was slower than usual. 8 months of Thomas made everything slower, more deliberate, a constant negotiation with her own body. She went upstairs. She went to the bathroom, the large bathroom, the one with the freestanding tub that she had never used. Grant had said, early in their marriage, that the water pressure was affected by the plumbing on the east side of the house and the tub was decorative more than functional. She had accepted this. She had not tested it. She had looked at the beautiful tub and used the shower instead for 3 years. She turned on the tap, the water came, full pressure, hot and immediate and real. She stood and watched it and thought, of course, of course. She turned down the temperature. She watched the steam rise. She did not get in. She sat on the edge of the tub, on the cold porcelain rim, with her robe around her and her swollen ankles and her enormous belly, and she listened to the sound of water filling a space it had never been allowed to fill. The sound was generous. It covered everything. She breathed it in, hot and mineral and clean. Her son moved. She put both hands on him. She said very quietly, "To no one and to him I know." Me too. The water rose. The steam thickened. The room smelled like heat. She sat on the rim of the tub and did not cry and did not think and did not manage anything. She just breathed. After a while, she turned the water off. The silence after was different from the silence before. Fuller. Like the silence after music rather than before it. She stood. She went to her bedside table. She opened the drawer. The sketchbook was still there. Brown cover, soft leather, worn at the corners. She had bought it at a small art supply shop on a street she loved, before the marriage, before everything that was before. It was half full of drawings, quick observations, color studies, margin notes, the small visual diary she had kept for 6 years of her professional life, and then simply stopped keeping because her life reorganized itself around someone else's schedule and someone else's priorities, and somewhere in that reorganization, the sketchbook ended up in a drawer. She took it out, she held it. She did not open it yet. She went to the window. Her brothers were in the driveway below. The three of them, heads bent together in the specific configuration they had had since childhood. Brendan's posture straight, Derek slightly forward, Marcus's hands moving slightly as he talked. She could not hear them. She did not need to. She watched them. She felt something she had not felt in a long time. It was not comfort exactly. It was not safety exactly. It was the direction of those things, the memory of them, the reminder that they were possible, that she had access to them, that they had come. She had not told them to come. They had simply said they were coming for dinner, they were on their way, they would see her at 7. They had not known. They had just come and they had been there. She pressed her forehead very briefly against the cold glass. She thought, I forgot that this exists. People who simply come. She went back downstairs. Brendan was on the phone in the entry hall, speaking quietly. He held up one finger when he saw her one moment and kept talking. Marcus was in the kitchen. He had found somehow a cup of tea. He held it out to her when she came in. She sat at the small kitchen table, not the formal dining room, with its 14 chairs and its centerpiece changed seasonally and its lighting designed to impress. The small kitchen table that Grant called the staff table, that she ate at alone on the evenings he was traveling, and she did not feel like performing a meal for herself in the dining room. She wrapped her hands around the cup. It was chamomile. He had found chamomile. She had hidden it at the back of the pantry because Grant did not drink herbal tea, and she had wanted something that was just for her. Marcus sat across from her. He opened his laptop. He said, I need to show you something, and I need you to not panic. She looked at him. She said, show me. He turned the screen, 2 accounts, 1 domestic. One flagged with a location she recognized, the Cayman Islands, a place Grant had mentioned 3 times in the context of legitimate tax structures, a place she had never thought to question. The domestic account, transfers. Small ones, irregular, beginning 14 months ago. The offshore account, larger transfers, beginning 8 months ago. 8 months ago. She looked at the date. She had found out she was pregnant 9 months ago. She had told Grant at 8 months, she remembered exactly. She had been sitting in the kitchen, this table, and he had come in late from a board dinner, and she had the test in her hand, and she had told him, and he had paused, a very specific pause, and then he had smiled and said that was wonderful news and kissed her forehead. 8 months ago. She said, he started moving money when I got pregnant. Marcus said, it looks that way, yes. She looked at the screen. She thought he was already planning. She thought the slap was not a loss of control. The slap was impatience. The slap was the day his timeline got disrupted and his patience ran out. She sat with that. She wrapped her hands tighter around the cup. She said, how much? Marcus looked at her. His face told her before he spoke. He said, $45 million across both accounts, over 14 months. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator made a small sound. The kind of small sound a refrigerator makes that you never notice except in the specific silence of a room where something enormous has just been said. She said he was planning this before tonight. Marcus said yes. She said he was planning to have me sign something, something that would reduce what I could claim, and he was moving money before I could claim it. Marcus said that is what it looks like. She thought he was planning this. The hitting was not an accident. She thought it was the day his patience ran out. She did not say those words aloud yet. They lived inside her, clean and hard and certain. She drank her tea. It was too hot. She drank it anyway. Outside, a car passed, the particular swish of it on the damp evening road, small, ordinary. Moving through the night without knowing anything about this kitchen, This table, these $45 million, this woman, this child, this cup of tea that was finally hers to drink without asking. Brendan came into the kitchen. He set his phone on the table. He said his attorney called mine, which means he had his attorney's number ready. Tonight, after what just happened, he let that land. She let it land. He said, I told mine to be ready. We are moving in the morning. She looked at her oldest brother. She said, all right. That was all. Just all right. And in that small agreement was the beginning of everything that came next. Her mother arrived at 9:37 in the evening. Patricia Calloway came through the front door of the Whitfield estate with her coat still on. She had her reading glasses pushed up on top of her head, which meant she had been reading when Brendan called and had stood up immediately without stopping to put them down. She came in the way Patricia always came in, as if she had simply decided to be somewhere, and the architecture had no choice but to accommodate her. She found Caroline in the kitchen. She looked at her daughter's face. She did not say, I told you so. She did not say, I worried about this. She did not say any of the things that would have been true and would have cost Caroline something she did not have to spare right now. She said, where is the kettle? Marcus pointed. Patricia filled it. She moved around the kitchen with the specific efficiency of a woman who has been solving problems in other people's kitchens for 40 years. She found cups. She found the chamomile still on the counter from Marcus's earlier efforts. She found the small honey in the cabinet above the stove, the raw honey, the one Caroline had ordered herself and Grant had never touched. She brought 2 cups to the table and sat down across from her daughter. She said, what do you need? Caroline looked at her mother. She said, I need to think. Patricia nodded. Then think. I am right here. They drank tea. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The kitchen smelled like chamomile and Patricia's hand cream, something floral and practical that Caroline had known since childhood, a scent that meant you are with someone who will not leave. Outside the window above the sink, the last of the evening had become full night. A moth was bumping softly against the glass, small, persistent, finding the light and finding it again. Caroline thought about the third date. She thought about it differently now. She had pulled up the memory in the hallway when Marcus asked how long, and she had looked at it and put it back. Now she took it out again and looked at it properly. He had taken the wine list from her hand. She had laughed. She had called it consideration. But underneath the laugh, underneath the smile she had performed, because she understood instinctively that this was a moment that required a certain kind of response, what had she actually felt? She had felt smaller. She had felt the precise and particular smallness of being managed by someone who had decided they knew better. She had felt it, and she had named it something else, and she had moved on. And then she had done that again, and again, and again. How many times over 3 years had she felt something true and named it something easier? Their wedding. She had wanted her art school friends there. All of them. Loud and colorful and specific. The people who had known her when she was 23 and absolutely certain about what she wanted from her life. Grant had explained. Gently, completely. The guest list needed to reflect the nature of the occasion. Investors, board members, people whose presence at the wedding would communicate something about the Whitfield name. He was not excluding her friends. He was curating the event with purpose. She had called her art school friends and said it was a small ceremony. She had smiled when she said it. She had almost believed herself. She thought, how many times did I almost believe myself? Patricia said, you do not have to decide everything tonight. I know, Caroline said. Patricia looked at her daughter for a moment. The 3 of them are here. That is enough for tonight, Caroline thought. It is more than enough. It is more than I have had in years. She heard something shift in the front of the house. A door. Voices. Derek's low murmur. Then quiet. She thought about Grant in that drawing room. She thought about the calculation in his face when he turned and saw her. Not guilt. Not surprise. Management. He had not even felt guilty. That was the thing she kept returning to. He had not felt guilty. He had felt inconvenienced. She thought, I spent 3 years trying not to inconvenience him. I arranged my entire life around the logistics of his comfort. I reduced myself to the size that fit neatly into the space he had decided to give me. And I told myself it was love. I told myself it was what a good marriage looked like. Her son moved. That slow rolling push she had come to know as his particular signature. He was always moving, always pressing at the edges of the space he was in, insisting on the full dimensions of it. She pressed her hand flat against him. She thought, you will not learn to make yourself smaller. Not from me. Not from anyone. Not if I can help it. She looked at her mother. She said, he has been moving money. Patricia was still. Since I got pregnant, Caroline said. He has been moving money away, $45 million, in hidden accounts. Patricia looked at her tea. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said he was never afraid of you leaving him. Caroline looked at her. He was afraid of what you would take when you did, Patricia said. That is a very different kind of fear. The moth bumped against the window glass again. Outside, somewhere up the street, a car door closed. The sound of an ordinary life continuing at a normal volume, unconcerned with any of this. Caroline said, I need a divorce attorney. A good one. Not anyone connected to Grant or to his law firm or to anyone he knows. Tonight if possible, or first thing in the morning. Patricia said, I know someone. Of course she did. Patricia Calloway knew someone for everything. This was not luck. This was 61 years of deliberate attention to the world and the people in it. Her name is Sylvia Rand, Patricia said. She is the best in the city. And she has absolutely no patience for men like Grant Whitfield. Call her, Caroline said. Patricia reached for her phone. Caroline went upstairs. She went to her closet. She stood in the doorway of it. Her side and his side. The careful architecture of shared space, divided with the precision of everything else in this house. Her side, cream, taupe, dusty rose. A specific careful palette that he had mentioned early in their marriage he found elegant. He had not said, please wear these colors. He had said elegant, and she had started buying these colors. By year 2, she had stopped thinking of it as a preference he had expressed, and started thinking of it as simply her preference, as simply who she was. She looked at her side of the closet. She could not find one item of clothing she had bought because she wanted it. Not one. She went to the drawer at the bottom. The bottom drawer, the one she had stopped opening because it felt embarrassing to look at. Her pre-marriage clothes, the art school clothes, the gallery curator clothes. The clothes of a woman who had opinions about color and texture and silhouette because she had spent years developing opinions about everything visual and saw no reason to stop expressing those opinions in what she wore. She opened the drawer. The green sweater was on top. She knew it immediately. Soft merino, the color of new leaves in the particular bright moment just after rain. She had loved this sweater unreasonably. She had worn it every week one winter and felt like herself every single time. She took it out. It still felt the same. Light and specific and entirely not taupe. She put it on over the cream robe. She looked strange. She knew she looked strange. 8 months pregnant in a cream robe under a green sweater, standing in a designer closet at 10 o'clock at night. She felt more like herself than she had in years. She reached back into the drawer, the sketchbook, her old canvas art school bag, faded and specific, and with a broken strap she had always meant to fix. A pair of worn jeans with a faint yellow paint stain on the left knee, Vermeer yellow, the color she had mixed for the nursery wall. She had not connected those two things until this moment. She had painted her son's nursery in the color she had loved in her other life. She sat down on the closet floor, on her side, on the soft carpet she had specified for her side. She opened the sketchbook. The first page is studies of hands. She had always drawn hands. They were difficult, and she had been practicing them. Page after page of hands reaching, resting, curled, open. Then architecture. She had spent a week drawing the corner of a building she passed every day on the way to the gallery. The precise way the stone caught light at different hours. Then a dog she had seen through a coffee shop window on a Tuesday morning in 2019 looked at her through the glass, with the complete philosophical certainty of a dog who knows what he wants and wants it now. She had been so present in that life, so attentive to the things around her. She thought, I used to see everything. I used to record what I saw. And then I stopped seeing. I stopped recording. I stopped being someone who noticed. How do you stop noticing? You give all of your noticing to someone else. You redirect it. You spend so much energy watching them, their moods, their preferences, the temperature of their presence in a room that you have nothing left for the Tuesday dog or the corner of the stone building or the specific quality of rainlight on new leaves. She sat on the floor of her closet and looked at the person she had been. She thought, there you are. She thought, I have been looking for you. She heard Marcus on the stairs. Car? He said, which was what he had called her since he was 4 years old, and Caroline was too many syllables. In the closet, she said. A moment, and then he appeared in the doorway. He looked at her. On the floor, in the green sweater. He looked at the sketchbook in her hands. He said, good, just that. Good. She said, I need a divorce attorney. Mom's calling one, he said. She said, I need everything you found about the accounts. All of it. Documented. Already done, he said. She looked at her youngest brother. She thought about the particular gift of Marcus, the way he moved through financial systems, the way other people move through rooms, easily, without making noise, finding the thing that was not supposed to be found. She said, how bad is it? He said, the legal structure around those accounts is complicated, but the timing makes it straightforward. He moved assets after the marriage began. That is dissipation. And if the prenuptial agreement was drafted by his own attorney, It was, she said. He recommended the lawyer. I remember thinking it was efficient. Marcus looked at her. He recommended the lawyer who drafted your prenuptial agreement, Marcus said. And that lawyer works for him. She heard this. She said that is a conflict of interest. It is potentially avoidable conflict, Marcus said, which may mean the prenuptial agreement is worth significantly less than Grant thinks it is. She sat on the floor of her closet. She thought he built the cage himself. She thought he built the cage himself and handed me the key to it and told me to hold it for safekeeping, and then he looked me in the eye every single day and told me I was free. She looked at the green sweater. She thought, no more. She stood up. Slowly, with the particular effort of 8 months of Thomas pressing down on every movement, she said, I am going to check on the nursery. Marcus nodded. She went down the hall. She stood in the doorway of the nursery. White crib. Yellow walls, the specific Vermeer yellow she had mixed herself and tested 6 times before she was satisfied. The mobile, small silver moons and stars she had found at a small maker's market on a Saturday when Grant was playing golf, and she had walked for 3 hours through the city just because she could. She had put herself into this room. Every corner of it was chosen. Every detail deliberate. The soft rug with its irregular pattern that looked like water. The low bookshelf already full. She had been buying books for Thomas since month 4, children's books and poetry, and a worn copy of a picture book she had loved so much as a child that she had tracked down a first edition. She put her hand on the wall. The yellow paint was smooth and dry and real. She said quietly to the room, to her son, to the person she was becoming in real time, he does not get to take this from you. She meant the nursery. She meant more than the nursery. She went back downstairs. Sylvia Rand was already on her way. Sylvia arrived at 9:55. She was shorter than Caroline expected and moved faster than seemed possible for someone who also managed to look entirely composed. Her hair was silver at the temples growing in, not colored, the specific silver of someone who had decided not to fight it. She had on a blazer over what was clearly an outfit she had been wearing at home when the call came. She did not apologize for this. She set her bag on the kitchen table and opened it, and took out her legal pad and said, start from the beginning. Tell me everything. I will tell you what matters. Caroline told her everything. She did not cry. She'd cried already. She was in the recording stage now, the stage where you go back over the things that happened and retrieve each one clearly and lay them out. The prenuptial agreement 3 years ago. The lawyer she had used was recommended by Grant's office. She had not thought this was unusual at the time. Sylvia wrote something on her pad, the hidden accounts. She gestured to Marcus's laptop, which he turned towards Sylvia. Sylvia looked at the screen for 30 seconds without speaking. Then, this is dissipation of marital assets. If Marcus's analysis holds up in court, and this looks very solid, the prenuptial agreement becomes largely irrelevant. He voided it himself. Caroline heard this. Something shifted in her chest. Not hope exactly. Something with an edge to it. She thought. He was so certain. He was so completely certain that I would take whatever he gave me and be grateful and disappear. He does not know who I was before him. The thought arrived quietly and with enormous force. He does not know who I am right now, and he does not know who I am going to be. Brendan came into the kitchen. He set his phone on the table with a specific deliberateness that meant it was important. He called me, Brendan said. Everyone looked at him. Grant called me 15 minutes ago, Brendan said. He wants to discuss this rationally. His word. Rationally. He suggested his attorney would be in touch. And he mentioned in passing, the way he mentions things he wants you to think are not threats, but are that Caroline signed a comprehensive prenuptial agreement, and that she should understand her position before making decisions she cannot walk back from. The kitchen was quiet. Sylvia said, did you record this? Brendan looked at her. Of course, he said. Sylvia said, good. She made a note. That call constitutes another instance of intimidation. We can use it. There was a knock, not at the front door, at the service entrance. The door that the housekeeper used, the one at the side of the house that most guests did not know existed. Derek, who had come through from the drawing room sometime in the last hour, and was now simply present in the space the way Derek was always simply present, went to the door. He opened it. He looked at the person standing there. Then he looked back into the kitchen with an expression that Caroline could not immediately read. She said, who is it? Derek said, someone who wants to talk to you. A pause. He stepped back. Nora Calloway came in. She was not what Caroline had expected. She did not know exactly what she had expected in her 3 years of marriage. She had occasionally imagined the theoretical other woman, the one she sometimes suspected existed, and immediately punished herself for suspecting because she was doing that thing again, overreacting, being too sensitive, but she had not expected this. Nora was 29 years old. She had on a blazer over a workout shirt. Her hair was not right. Her eyes were swollen in the specific way of someone who has been crying for many hours. She was holding an envelope in both hands, and she was looking at Caroline with an expression that Caroline recognized because it was one she had been wearing herself for years, the expression of a woman who has found out the true shape of her situation and is still in the early stages of understanding it. She said, "I know why this is strange. I know I am the last person you want to see, but I have documentation, and I think you need to have it before his lawyers make it disappear." The kitchen was completely still. Caroline looked at this woman. She thought, I sent her a fruit basket. After the dinner she had been too tired to attend, the charity gala dinner, she had sent Nora a fruit basket to thank her for accompanying Grant. Nora had sent a handwritten note in return. Elegant loops. The phrase, "Grant is so lucky to have you." She thought, I wonder if she meant it when she wrote it. Derek had not moved. He was still at the door. Caroline said, "Let her in." Nora came to the table. She held the envelope in her hands for a moment before she put it down, like she was deciding something. Then she said, "I found out 2 days ago that I was not the only one." Silence. "The only one outside his marriage," she said, "that he was involved with. There is another woman. She is 23. She is a junior associate at his law firm, and she is also pregnant." No one spoke. The refrigerator made its small sound. Caroline thought, the room is very cold. She thought, or maybe that is just me. She put her hand on her belly. Thomas moved, his usual insistent pressure against her ribs. She kept her hand there. Nora said, "He told me the marriage had been over for years, that you had an arrangement, that you were only together for the baby." Caroline said, "We did not have an arrangement." Nora said, "I know that now." Caroline looked at her. She said, "He told you he was leaving me." Nora said, "He told me that the moment the baby was born and everything was legally settled, we were going to." She stopped. Her voice had done something. She steadied it. "He told me a very complete version of our future together. He had details. He had a timeline." She looked at the envelope. "Then I found out about the associate at the law firm," she said, "and I understood that I was not the plan. I was just the current arrangement. There is a difference." The kitchen was quiet. Nora opened the envelope. She laid the documents on the table. There was a draft NDA non-disclosure agreement. Caroline heard Sylvia say quietly, explaining it, always explaining things through dialogue rather than assumption. The NDA had been sent to Nora 6 weeks ago by Grant's personal attorney. It offered $3 million and a professional reference in exchange for her silence and her resignation from Whitfield Development. Nora had not signed it. "He thought I would," she said, "because he thinks everyone has a number. $3 million is a number most people sign for." She looked at Caroline. "But I found out about the associate," she said, "and I realized what I actually was to him. And $3 million did not seem like enough for that." Caroline looked at the woman across the table. She had every reason to despise this woman. The logic of it was simple and available, and she could have picked it up and used it. She chose not to. She thought she was also lied to. She was also used. She was also given a version of reality that was designed to keep her in a specific place and serving a specific purpose. The method was different. The result was the same. She thought, 2 women, 1 man, and a very complete architecture of deception. She said, "I am sorry he did this to you too." Nora looked at her. Something moved through her face. She said, "I am sorry I did not see it sooner." That was all. Marcus was already reading the NDA with the focused attention of a man who reads legal documents the way other people read text messages, quickly, completely, without missing anything. He said, "There is an addendum." Everyone looked at him. He turned the page. He read. His expression changed in the way Marcus's expression changed when he found something important, not dramatically, just a small tightening around the eyes, a stillness. He said, "The addendum has a trigger date." He said, "The trigger date is Thomas's due date." He looked at Caroline. "The addendum activates a series of financial transfers on the date the baby is born," he said. "These transfers would reduce the marital estate calculation to whatever the prenuptial agreement allows, which, based on the value of the company 3 years ago when the agreement was signed, is significantly less than the company is worth today." He paused. "He was going to have you sign a version of this," he said. "Not the NDA, a document he would have called a routine legal update. Before the baby came, while you were in the last weeks of pregnancy and not thinking about financial documents." Caroline heard this. She sat very still. Routine legal update. She almost laughed. She thought he had a plan. He had a complete, detailed, timed plan. The accounts, the NDA for Nora, the routine legal update for me, the associate at the law firm already pregnant. She thought I was in a production. I had a role in a production that was already written and staged and scheduled. She thought I was never a person to him. I was a position. The thought was enormous and terrible and clean. She put both hands on the table. She said, "Sylvia, what do we do first?" Sylvia looked at her. Something moved through the attorney's face, something she did not name, and that was not quite professional. Then it settled back into professional. She said, "We file first thing tomorrow. Before his attorney files anything, we get there first." She said, "And then we get to work." Grant's personal attorney was named Harlan Webb. Harlan Webb had been Grant's attorney for 12 years. He had drafted the prenuptial agreement. He had sent the NDA to Nora. He had prepared, Marcus now found by 11 o'clock that evening, the documents for the offshore trust structure in the Cayman Islands. He was also listed as a named partner in the domestic LLC. Whitfield Holdings subsidiary, registered in Delaware, no operational activity, just a structure through which money moved. Marcus set his laptop on the kitchen table and turned it toward Brendan. Brendan read for 60 seconds. He said he is not just his attorney. He is a participant in the structure. He said, that is not malpractice. That is conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The kitchen was quiet. Sylvia was reading her own copy. Her pen moved. She underlined something. She said, "This voids the prenuptial agreement on conflict of interest grounds." Definitively. Caroline did not have independent legal counsel. She had counsel that was fundamentally connected to the opposing party. She looked up. Grant Whitfield essentially wrote his own prenuptial agreement, she said, and then presented it to his future wife as a mutual document. Caroline heard this. She had signed that document 3 years ago in Grant's attorney's office. She had sat in a chair that was very comfortable and reviewed pages she did not entirely understand with a lawyer she trusted, because Grant had said she was excellent. She had thought, this is a formality. This is just something that powerful families do. This does not mean anything real about the way we see each other. She thought it meant exactly what it was. I just did not know how to read it. She thought, I know how to read it now. Brendan was on his phone again. He stepped into the hallway. She could hear his voice, but not the words, the particular cadence of Brendan Calloway talking to someone official at a not entirely appropriate hour of the evening. Derek came in from the front of the house. He poured himself a glass of water. He leaned against the counter. He said, "Where is he?" Caroline said, "Drawing room. Last I knew." Derek said, "He is on the phone." She said, "He is always on the phone." She meant this as a simple statement of fact, but it landed as she heard it as something larger. All the phone calls, all the rooms closed against her, all the conversations conducted somewhere she was not, all the information that traveled through this house while she sat in the rooms he designated for her and read and rearranged the art books and waited for him to return to her from whatever he was actually doing. Derek said, "He is not going to like what comes next." She said, "No, he is not." Nora had left an hour ago. She had exchanged contact information with Sylvia and agreed to be available as a witness. She had looked at Caroline once more before she left, a long look, a specific look, the look of someone trying to say something complex in the brief currency of eye contact, and then she had gone out the service entrance the same way she had come in. Caroline did not know what that look meant exactly. She knew it was not malicious. She knew it was not simple. She knew it would take a long time to understand and that she might never understand it completely. And that was all right, because some things were too layered for complete understanding, and the attempt was enough. At midnight, her phone showed a notification. A real estate industry website. A photograph. The Whitfield estate. Derek Calloway, identifiable in the frame, entering through the front door at approximately 7:30 that evening. The caption speculated about a family incident. She turned her phone face down. She thought, everyone is going to have an opinion about my life now. She felt the flicker of the old reflex, the need to explain, to manage perception, to ensure that the story being told about her was the right one. Then something replaced it. She thought, let them. She thought, I have been managing the story for 3 years and the story was a lie. Let the true story arrive however it arrives. She put her phone face down on the table. Patricia reached over and put her hand on top of it. She did not say anything. She just put her hand there. Brendan came back into the kitchen. He said, I made 2 calls. One to a colleague in financial crimes, one to the family attorney to prepare for tomorrow. We are filing tomorrow morning. He looked at Caroline. He said, do you want to sleep? I can stay. Derek can stay. Marcus can. I want to go to bed, she said. I want to sleep in the house tonight, in my room, and in the morning I want to file. She paused. She said, and I want his name off the nursery. Brendan said, he has not put his name on the nursery. She said, I know. I mean, I do not want him to. I do not want Thomas to grow up in a room that has his father's complicated name all over it. I want it to be just his room. Thomas's room. Brendan said, okay. She went upstairs. She got into the bed her side, the side she always slept on, the left side which she had always preferred and which Grant had known she preferred and had for 3 years occupied anyway, claiming the left side as his own and letting her adjust. She was on the right side of the bed. She moved to the left. She lay there. She put her hand on Thomas. She said, "Here is what is going to happen." She said it quietly, to the ceiling and to him. "We are going to file in the morning. It is going to be complicated. There will be parts of it that are not good, but we are going to be on the right sides of it. And when it is over, we are going to live somewhere we chose. And you are going to have a mother who knows who she is. That is the plan." The room was quiet. The house settled around her. The particular sounds of a house at night, the heating, something distant, the presence of her brothers in the rooms below. She closed her eyes. She thought, he was planning this before he hit me. The hitting was not a beginning. It was a symptom of a plan that was already in motion, of a man who had looked at her and made a calculation and decided she was a position to be managed, not a person to be loved. She thought, that is not my failure, that is his character. She had been afraid to think that. For 3 years, she had been circling that truth and always turning away from it, always finding a softer version, always making herself smaller to make him look larger. She was done shrinking. She felt it settle. Not dramatically, not with music. Just a quiet internal rearrangement, like furniture being moved in a room to finally reflect how the light actually fell. She was done shrinking. She slept. She woke at 5:43 in the morning. Thomas was moving. His particular early morning energy pressing, insistent, entirely himself. She lay in the left half of the bed and looked at the ceiling and thought, today is the day. She got up. She put on the green sweater over her pajamas. She went downstairs. Brendan was in the kitchen. He had made coffee, real coffee, not the precise pour-over ritual Grant had insisted on, but ordinary coffee in the automatic machine that Grant had kept in the pantry because it was for the staff. She sat down with a cup. Brendan sat across from her. He said, "How are you?" She said, "I am ready." He looked at her for a moment. He said, "You do not have to be ready. You just have to show up. I will be ready for both of us." She thought, this is what I forgot. This is what 3 years of isolation had erased from her memory. People who simply show up and say, "Let me carry this part." She said, "Marcus found 3 layers. Brendan said, I know. He was up until 3. She said, "Tell me the 3rd layer." Brendan wrapped his hands around his cup. He said, 7 years ago, before the marriage, Grant established a network of 5 shell companies. Registered across 3 jurisdictions, they hold real estate assets. The income from these properties has been flowing through the same system as the marital estate, but in a way that was designed to obscure the relationship. She said, "Which means," he said, "which means the full calculation of what he owns is larger than what we knew. And the way it connects to the marital estate gives our financial team grounds to argue for a share of assets that predate the marriage." She said, "He has been building this for 7 years. Brendan said yes. She thought 7 years. The marriage was 3. He spent 7 years building a financial architecture designed to contain his money and the people in it. She had been, for the last 3 of those years, one of the rooms in that architecture. She thought, the marriage was never the point. The point was the architecture. I was a component, she thought. That is the strangest and most clarifying thing I have understood yet. Sylvia arrived at 8. She had a clean blazer on. She had her legal pad. She had a colleague with her, a younger woman, early 30s, who Sylvia introduced as her associate and who immediately set up a second laptop at the kitchen table and began typing at a speed that inspired a specific kind of awe. Sylvia said, "The prenuptial agreement is void on conflict of interest grounds. I am putting that motion in today. We are also filing the divorce petition today, citing domestic violence and financial fraud, and Brendan will be filing the financial documentation with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit this afternoon." Caroline said, "The FBI, Brendan. The evidence warrants it. It is not leverage, it is not a threat, it is what the evidence requires." She nodded. She said, "What does he do when he finds out?" Sylvia said, "He is going to make an offer. He is going to think he can buy his way out of this the way he buys his way out of everything. We are going to let him make the offer, and then we are going to decline it, or counter it, depending on what it contains." Caroline said, "If he tries to use Thomas against me," Sylvia said, "he has already tried. The emergency motion filed last night claiming you are emotionally unstable is the opening move of a custody strategy. It is frivolous. We will defeat it. But it tells us everything we need to know about how he intends to fight." She said the last part with a very small, very specific expression. It was not quite a smile. It was the expression of someone who has seen this move before and knows exactly what comes next. Caroline said, "He thinks he can make me look irrational." Sylvia said, "He thinks that a pregnant woman who has just experienced a domestic violence incident can be characterized as unstable. He has done this before, not with you, but the pattern is in his behavior. We are prepared for it." Caroline looked at her attorney. She said, "I have not been losing my mind." Sylvia said, "No, you have not." She said, I have been living in a house that was designed to make me think I was. Sylvia said, yes. And that house is going to have a great deal to answer for. She paused. She said the gaslighting, and that is what this was. Systematic, sustained, deliberate actually works in our favor in the custody proceeding because it creates a pattern of behavior. And patterns in family court are everything. Caroline thought gaslighting, she had read about it, in the way you read about things that seem to be about other people, in the way you engage with a concept theoretically while the specific instance of it is happening to you in real time. She thought, I have been gaslit for 3 years. She thought, every time I felt something wrong and named it wrong. Every time I said I might be wrong. Every time I qualified, adjusted, accommodated. Every time I shrank. Every time I chose his version over my own. That was not my weakness. That was his design. She thought it the way you think something that changes the shape of a room quietly, without announcement, but irreversibly. The morning moved forward. Documents were drafted. Phone calls were made. Marcus worked in the corner of the kitchen with a focus that was almost meditative, tracking transactions and building the financial narrative that Sylvia would use in court. At noon, Grant's new attorney called Sylvia. Harlan Webb had quietly gone on indefinite leave from his firm. The new attorney was someone Caroline did not recognize. He said that Grant was open to discussions. He said that Grant had deep concern for Caroline's well-being and for the baby. He said Grant believed this could be resolved without extensive litigation if both parties were reasonable. Sylvia said, we will be in touch. She ended the call. She said, he is scared. Brendan scared men do stupid things. She said he already did one. The emergency motion was stupid. The call to my client through his attorney was stupid. He is moving too fast because he knows what Marcus found and he knows he cannot afford for it to be public. She looked at Caroline. He is going to make you an offer, she said. Soon. In the next 48 hours. It is going to look generous on the surface. And underneath? Caroline said. Sylvia said underneath, it will have a clause that protects his FBI exposure. He needs you to sign something that prevents you from cooperating with the financial crimes investigation. That is what the settlement will actually be about. Caroline said, that is not for sale. Sylvia looked at her. She said, good. Then we are on the same page. That afternoon, the financial news story broke, not from their side, from a reporter who had been tracking the public records around Whitfield Development's corporate filings and had found the connection to the LLC structure. The story was careful and technical, and used the phrase questions emerge and did not make accusations it could not support. But it was enough. Grant's stock dropped 6% in aftermarket trading. 2 board members called each other. Marcus was monitoring. The financial news story was sent by someone she did not know to the desk of a journalist who wrote about domestic violence and economic abuse. That journalist called Sylvia's office. The story was beginning to tell itself. She sat in the kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, and she ate something Patricia had made actual food at some point, something with eggs and bread, solid and warm and real, and she ate it and she thought, this is what happens when you stop containing the truth. It moves on its own. It finds its own level. You do not have to push it. The truth, she thought, was always going to come out. She had just been one of the structures containing it. She was not doing that anymore. It was quiet in the house at midnight. Brendan was in the guest room. Derek had gone home to his apartment across the city, but had made her promise to call anytime, any reason. He would be there in 12 minutes. He said it the way Derek said things, factually, without drama, 12 minutes precisely because he had already calculated the route. Marcus was in the small study, still working. She could see the light under the door. Patricia had gone home at 10. She had hugged Caroline at the door for a long time and not said anything, and that had been exactly right. Sylvia was filing in the morning. The house was quiet. Caroline could not sleep. She went to the kitchen. She stood at the open pantry for a moment. She looked at the shelves. Grant's specific dietary requirements were here: the particular protein supplements, the brand of sparkling water he preferred, the coffee for the pour-over machine. Her things were pushed to the back. The chamomile, the honey, a box of cereal she had bought because she wanted it and not because it fit any nutritional specification. She took the cereal box. She sat at the small kitchen table. She ate cereal from the box, not in a bowl, just from the box. At midnight, the kitchen's table he called the staff table, in the green sweater, in this house that was going to stop being this house very soon. She thought about Thomas. She thought, how do I explain to him that I chose this? She thought, how do I explain that I stayed in a house with a man who frightened me because I believed the story that said I was overreacting? She thought, how do I tell him about gaslighting without making him afraid of love? How do I tell him that some people use love as a method without making him unable to receive it from the people who mean it? These were the questions with no good answers yet. She was 31 years old and 8 months pregnant and eating cereal from the box at midnight, and she did not have good answers. But she knew something. She knew that she was not going to sign Grant's settlement. She knew she was going to file in the morning. She knew that what came after was going to be the life she built, not the life she was placed in. She put the cereal box down. She looked at the table. She thought, I spent 3 years trying to deserve this table, this house, this life. I tried to deserve it by being smaller, quieter, less. And all the while the table was just a table, the house was just a building, the life was just an arrangement. The real question was never whether I deserved his life. The real question was why I stopped building my own. She got up. She went to the kitchen counter and she took out the laptop she had bought herself. Years ago, before the marriage, a small light machine she used to carry everywhere, now kept in a drawer because she did not use it often. She opened it. She sat at the small table. She found the website of the gallery where she used to work. It had been rebranded. New director, new aesthetic. She looked at it carefully, professionally, with the eyes she had spent years developing. They had moved away from the bold conceptual work she had championed. The new programming was safer, more commercially appealing. She had opinions about this, actual opinions. She could feel them. The contact form was still there. She sat with the cursor blinking for a moment. Then she typed, "My name is Caroline Whitfield. I used to work here as a curator, under the name Caroline Calloway. I am not sure if anyone remembers me. I am in the process of making some significant changes in my life. I would love to have coffee if anyone there has the time." She looked at it. She thought about adding something, an explanation, an apology for disappearing. A qualifier. I know it has been years. I know this might be strange. She deleted the qualifiers. She sent it as written. Then she closed the laptop. She went upstairs. She lay down in the left half of the bed. She put her hand on Thomas. She said, "Tomorrow." Just that. Tomorrow. She slept. She slept through the night. For the first time in 6 weeks, she slept all the way through. In the morning, she woke to Thomas pressing against her ribs, and the Vermeer yellow light coming through a gap in the curtains, and the sound of Marcus's voice from downstairs, already on a call, already working. She got up. She put on the green sweater. She went downstairs. They filed at 9:17 in the morning. The press statement went out at 9:31. Sylvia had written it. It was 14 sentences. It used the words domestic violence and financial fraud and documentation supporting these claims. It was the most specific press statement Caroline had ever seen. She did not read it on her phone. She did not look at news sites or social media. She put her phone face down on the kitchen table and left it there. She ate breakfast. Patricia had come by at 8 with actual food, not takeout, not something ordered, but things she had cooked herself, brought in containers, soup, bread, fruit, a small cake she had baked the evening before, while she said she needed something to do with her hands. She had left them on the counter and sat for 20 minutes and then said she had an errand and would be back. Caroline sat at the small table and ate Patricia's soup. It tasted like childhood, like the kitchen in the house she had grown up in, the house with the worn counter and the particular smell of Patricia's cooking and the sound of her 3 brothers doing their separate versions of being alive in adjacent rooms. She thought, I grew up in a house where I knew exactly what I liked. She thought, when did I stop knowing? Brendan came in from the hallway. He said his board called me. She looked up. He said, not Grant. The board, specifically the 4 independent directors. They want a conversation. She said, about what? He said, about resolution. They are managing their exposure. They want this settled before the FBI inquiry becomes a court proceeding. She said, what did you tell them? He said, I told them you would discuss terms. Generous terms. Terms that reflect the full value of the marital estate. He paused. I also told them that one of your conditions would be a public acknowledgement of the domestic violence incident. Silence. She said they will fight that. He said they will try. But asking for it tells them what kind of opposition they are dealing with. And it tells them that this is not going away quietly. She thought about the phrase, public acknowledgement. She thought about the emergency motion Grant had filed, calling her emotionally unstable. She thought about 3 years of being told she overreacted. She thought about the specific and calculated work of making her doubt her own perceptions. She thought the truth being public is not revenge. The truth being public is just the truth, she said. Tell them we are discussing, but I will decide what I accept. Brendan nodded. The afternoon moved through itself. Marcus was working in the study. She could hear the clicks of his keyboard through the wall, steady, regular, the sound of someone turning financial chaos into a comprehensible narrative. She went to the nursery. She sat in the rocking chair. She rocked. Thomas moved. The mobile turned barely, the faintest breath of something, a draft from the window, Something imperceptible, and the small silver moons and stars caught the light and threw it back against the yellow walls. She rocked. She thought this is what it was supposed to be all along. This chair, this room, this quiet. Just her and her son before the world got in. She thought it is still this, even now. Even with everything happening in the rooms below, it is still just this, up here, in this room that she built with her own choices. She rocked. The moons and stars turned. After a while, she picked up her phone. There was a response from the gallery. She had sent the email at midnight. It was now 2 in the afternoon. The director had written back, "Caroline, of course I remember you. I have actually thought of you often. We have been doing important work here, and there is a piece of it that I have always thought would have been better with your eye. Please come in. Anytime this week. I mean that." She read it twice. She thought they remembered. She thought they noticed I was gone. She thought about the 3 years of being told, implicitly and explicitly, that her professional self was a hobby, a pleasant interest, something she could return to eventually, if she wanted, but not urgent, not necessary, not the most important thing about her. She thought, the most important thing about me, professionally, was the work. And the work was always good. And someone who knows good work knew it. She wrote back, "Thursday at 11, if that works." She pressed send. She went back to rocking. She thought, I have been an expert at not wanting things for 3 years. She thought, I am done being that expert. She rocked. Thomas pressed against her ribs, insistent, entirely himself. She said, I know. That evening, Grant's attorney sent the settlement offer. Sylvia called her. She said, "It looks generous." It is not. She described the terms. More than the prenuptial agreement had allowed. Significantly more on the surface. But there was a non-disparagement clause. There was a clause describing the domestic violence incident as disputed. There was a custody arrangement that gave Grant considerable influence over Thomas's life. And there was a clause buried, located through Marcus's specific genius for buried things requiring Caroline to relinquish cooperation with the FBI financial crimes investigation. He wanted to buy the investigation. He wanted to buy her silence about the investigation, wrapped in numbers large enough that she might not look underneath. She said no. Sylvia said, "I had a feeling you would say that." She said, "Tell him no. Tell him I am available to discuss, but the non-disparagement clause, the characterization of the incident, and the clause regarding the investigation are all non-negotiable. Those are not starting positions. They are not in play." Sylvia said, "Understood," she said in Sylvia. "Yes? I stayed quiet for years. I am done being quiet. Not because I am angry. Because the truth matters, and I am the one who has to tell it." A pause. Sylvia said, "I know. That is why I took this case." Then she added, in a tone that was very slightly different from her usual tone, "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Caroline hung up. She sat in the nursery for a little while longer. The moons and stars had stopped turning. She reached up and gave the mobile a gentle spin. They moved again. She watched them. She thought, everything I did in this room I did for love. And love is still the right reason. It was just directed at the wrong person. She thought, Thomas is the right person? She thought, and myself. She thought myself, too. The OBGYN appointment was at 10 in the morning. Patricia drove. They took Patricia's car, which was smaller than any of the cars in the Whitfield garage, and smelled like hand cream and the particular neutral scent of a car that belongs to someone practical. The radio played something from the 90s, a song Caroline remembered from childhood, the chorus of it, anyway, which was all she had ever known. Patricia turned it up slightly, not to fill the silence, just because it was the right volume. They drove. It was almost normal. That was the strangest thing. The morning was almost normal. Traffic moved. The city did its city thing, storefronts opening, delivery trucks, a man walking a very determined small dog. All of it continuing at the usual volume, unconcerned with her. She had always found that comforting and distressing in equal parts. The world's disinterest, its ability to simply continue. Today it was just comforting. Dr. Helen Marsh had been Caroline's doctor since the 3rd month. She was 52 and efficient, and had very specific opinions about prenatal nutrition that she expressed without apology. Caroline had liked her immediately. She had the quality Caroline associated with the best professionals. She paid attention, without making you feel surveyed. Today, Dr. Marsh examined her with the usual thoroughness. She checked the baby's position, his heartbeat, her blood pressure, the swelling in her ankles. She made notes. She did not rush. Then she looked at Caroline's face. She examined the bruise. It was fading, but it was there. The specific coloring of a bruise, 3 days old, yellowish at the edges, still dark at the center. She said, "Tell me what happened." Caroline told her. "Not the whole story, just my husband struck me." Dr. Marsh made a note. Then she looked up. She said, I have notes going back 4 months. 3 instances of bruising. One to the upper arm, you said it was a door. One to the shoulder, you said it was a cabinet. One to the wrist. She paused. For the wrist, you gave me no explanation. Caroline heard this. She had no memory of not explaining the wrist. She tried to remember. The appointment. The wrist. She must have come in with the bruise visible and simply said nothing and assumed it would be attributed to clumsiness. Or she had been so accustomed to explaining things away that the absence of an explanation had not felt significant. She sat with that. She thought, I had stopped explaining because I had stopped noticing. I had normalized it to the point where it did not require a story anymore. That was the most frightening thing she had understood yet. Dr. Marsh said, I documented them as incidental injuries at the time, because you were adamant, and it is not my place to override a patient's account of her own experience. She paused, but I kept the notes. She looked at Caroline steadily. Would you like copies? Caroline said, yes. Please, send them to my attorney. They will be there by end of day, Dr. Marsh said. She put her pen down. She said, I want to say something that is not medical. Caroline looked at her. This is not your fault, Doctor, Marsh said. Not the bruises, not the marriage, not any of it. What happened to you is a pattern. It follows a predictable escalation. And the fact that you are here today moving forward, that is not ordinary. That is actually very hard. And I want you to know that I see it. Caroline sat in the thin paper examination gown with the fetal monitor still attached to her wrist, and Thomas making his usual insistent movements, and she listened to her doctor say that. She did not cry. She received it. She thought, I have been trying to deserve other people's approval for so long that I forgot this exists. Someone simply seeing what is true and saying it. She said, thank you. Dr. Marsh nodded. She said, how are you sleeping? Caroline almost laughed. She said, better than I have in months, actually. Dr. Marsh looked at her for a moment. Then she said, good, keep doing whatever that is. In the car on the way home, Patricia did not say anything for several miles. Then she said, your father would have handled this differently. Caroline looked at her. Patricia said, he would have been less strategic and considerably more loud, and you would have had to manage him while managing everything else. She paused. The boys get their temperament from me, the stubbornness from him. Caroline said, I get the stubbornness from both of you. Patricia said, yes, you do. The city moved past the windows. Patricia said, when this is over, and it will be over, I want to take you somewhere, just us. Somewhere you have not been, and that has nothing to do with him. Caroline thought about this. She said, I want to go to a specific museum in Amsterdam. There is a Vermeer there that I have only seen in photographs. I have been meaning to go for 10 years, Patricia said. Then we will go. Just like that. We will go. Caroline looked out the window. She thought, I have been postponing that for 10 years, for the vague future when it would be convenient, when the timing was right. When Grant could take time away from the board, she thought, I could have gone. I could have simply gone. She thought, I am going to go. That evening, the FBI inquiry became public. A financial reporter found it in a court filing a motion referencing an open federal investigation into the LLC structure of Whitfield Holdings. The story ran at 7 in the evening. Grant's stock dropped 22% in after-hours trading. 2 board members resigned by 8 o'clock. His charitable foundation issued a statement at 9 saying they were aware of recent developments and reviewing their relationship with the Whitfield Foundation. The Children's Hospital wing, the one with his name on it, issued a similar statement. Derek, watching the news from Caroline's kitchen, said quietly, the name comes off the wall. Probably. She said good. She meant it simply, without drama, without satisfaction. Just good. Good that the world was being given the opportunity to see what she had been unable to say for 3 years. Good that the architecture of control was developing the cracks it had always deserved. Good that the truth was finding its level. She went to bed at 10. She lay in the left half of the bed. She thought, the hardest part was admitting I knew something was wrong all along. I knew it in the 3rd date with the wine list. I knew it at the wedding. I knew it every time I filed something away under consideration and moved on. I knew it in the 3 bruises I explained and the one I did not. She thought knowing I was right about what I felt is not a wound. She thought, it is information. She thought, and I am using it. She put her hand on Thomas. He pushed back. She slept. 3 days after the filing, Brendan met with the 4 independent board directors of Whitfield Development in a conference room at a hotel downtown. Neutral ground. No Whitfield staff, no Whitfield attorney. Just 4 people who had been on a board that was now a liability and wanted to understand their options. Caroline was not there. She did not want to be. She was at Sylvia's office, which had become, in the last week, something like a second home. She knew the coffee machine. She knew which chair had a loose armrest. She knew the way the light came through the east window at 10 in the morning and moved across the conference table by noon. She sat at that table with Marcus and Sylvia's associate, who had a name Emily and a precision that reminded Caroline of Marcus. Marcus had found the third layer the previous night. He laid it out now: 7 years of shell companies, 5 of them, 3 jurisdictions. Real estate assets accumulated before the marriage, income flowing through the same system as the marital estate, connected in ways that the original financial architecture was designed to obscure. Sylvia listened. She said, "How much?" Marcus said, "The full picture, including the marital estate, the dissipated assets, and the attributable portion of the shell company income. We are looking at equitable distribution from a base of approximately $800 million. The room was quiet. Caroline looked at the number. She thought about $800 million. She thought, I do not want $800 million. That is not what this is about. That was never what this was about. She said, what is fair? Sylvia looked at her. She said, fair, given the dissipation, the fraudulent prenuptial, and the documented pattern of control, fair is somewhere between 15 and 20% of the total estate. She said, that is a significant amount. Caroline said, I know. I want what is mine because it is mine. Not because I want to take something from him. Not to be vindictive. Because I earned it. I was in that marriage. I contributed to it. I gave up a career and a professional life and 3 years of building something for myself. That has a value. I want the value. Sylvia said, exactly right. She made a note. She said, and I want to say this position, the one you just described, is going to be compelling in court. Because it is specific and reasonable, and it makes him look like what he is, which is someone who tried to take everything while leaving nothing. Caroline said, I also want to open a gallery. Sylvia looked up. Emily paused her typing. Marcus smiled. He was the only one who was not surprised. Caroline said, I have been thinking about it. I met with the director of my old gallery last week. Just coffee, exploratory. He offered me a partnership role. I am not going to take it. I want my own name on the door. I want to start something from the beginning, and I want to fund it from my share of the settlement. That is the specific thing I want to build. She looked at Sylvia. Is that possible? Sylvia said, it is not just possible. It is going to look very good in the filing. A woman rebuilding a professional identity that was suppressed during the marriage. That is a narrative the court will understand. Caroline nodded. She thought she had spent 20 years making herself smaller so he could feel larger. She thought she was done shrinking. She did not say it aloud. She did not need to. It was simply true. It was simply the thing that had become true and was now just part of the architecture of her. Brendan called at noon. He said, the board wants to settle. They are willing to support your terms as a condition of their cooperation with the FBI inquiry. They want a clean resolution that separates them from Grant's personal conduct. He said, they are also willing to recommend that the board remove him as CEO, pending the outcome of the investigation. Silence. Then Caroline said, what does that mean for the stock? Brendan said, it stabilizes. Some. The public announcement of his removal as an act of institutional accountability is better for the stock than continued association with an ongoing federal investigation. He said, it is good for us. His personal power over the company is removed. Your equity stake becomes more valuable. And the signal to the court about the pattern of behavior is strengthened. She said, tell them we will discuss. Sylvia will handle the specifics. She hung up. She sat for a moment. She thought, his board called Brendan, not him. She thought, his board is choosing the company over him. She thought, that is what it looks like when the architecture starts to come apart. Not with a crash, with a series of quiet professional choices made by people protecting themselves. She thought, I understand that impulse. I spent 3 years making quiet choices to protect myself within a structure that was not designed for my protection. I am making different choices now. She looked at Marcus. She said, find me everything I need to know about opening a gallery. Space, licensing, operating costs. I want to know what it actually takes. He said, I already started. She looked at him. He said, I started last week. When you went back to bed on the first night, I thought, she is going to want to build something. She always builds something. She looked at her youngest brother. She thought, he knew me before I forgot who I was. She thought, that is the specific gift of people who have known you long enough. She said, thank you. He said, that's what I'm here for. She went to the window of Sylvia's conference room. The city outside was doing its city things. Ordinary. Moving. Unconcerned. She thought, I am going to be in that city soon. In a space I chose. With a name I chose on the door. Showing work that deserves to be seen, she thought, I am going to see things again. Not a wish. A plan. She turned back to the room. She said, all right, let's get to work. 2 weeks after the filing, the settlement negotiations were in their third round. Grant's new attorney, he was on his third attorney now, a detail that Sylvia noted with professional satisfaction, was presenting himself as reasonable. The offer had evolved. It was now on its surface, considerably more generous. The numbers had moved. But the non-disparagement clause was still there. Reduced, reworded, but present. And the clause regarding the FBI. Cooperation was still there, buried differently, worded more carefully, but present. Caroline read it with Sylvia. She said, "Still no." Sylvia said, "I know." She said, "What is the actual number, the real number, for equitable distribution?" Sylvia said, 12% of the total estate, plus the dissipated assets returned, gives you approximately $112 million. She said, 12%. Sylvia said, "Based on your contribution to the marriage, your direct support of his professional life, your management of the household, the career you suspended, and the fraudulent nature of the prenuptial agreement, 12% is the figure our financial expert believes a court would uphold." Caroline thought about 12%. She thought about a gallery. She thought about walls covered in work she believed in. She thought about her name on the door. She thought 12% of $800 million is enough to build something real, something that matters, something that outlasts all of this. She said, "Counter with 12%. No non-disparagement clause. No FBI clause. Full public acknowledgement of the domestic violence incident, in writing. Independent mediator for custody." The Whitfield name removed from the hospital wing, with a redirected donation in Thomas's name to a domestic violence organization. Sylvia looked at her over the top of her reading glasses. She said, "The hospital wing is going to be difficult." Caroline said, "I know." She said, "It is the condition I care about most." Sylvia said, "Why?" She said, "Because he put his name on something good to make himself look good while doing bad things inside his own house. And I do not want his name on something good anymore. I want the good thing to be good, without him attached to it." Sylvia wrote it down. She said, "All right." Nora called that afternoon. She had retained her own attorney. The financial crimes investigation had included an interview with her. She had cooperated fully. She called Caroline not to report this, but simply Caroline thought because she needed to tell someone who would understand what it had felt like. She said, "He was there, in the interview, or his attorney was, anyway, in the hallway. I could see him through the glass." Caroline said, "How was that?" Nora said, "Strange, he looked the same." "That is the thing. He looked completely the same." A pause. She said, "I thought he would look different. I thought finding out everything I found out would have changed him somehow, but he just looked exactly like himself. Calm and certain and completely contained." Caroline said, "He always does." Nora said, "Yes." Another pause. Nora said, "I wanted to say the things I said to you that first night, in your kitchen. I meant them." Caroline said, "I know you did." Nora said, "I hope." She stopped. Started again. "I hope you build something that matters. I think you will." Caroline said, "I think so too." They hung up. She sat for a moment. She thought about Nora. She thought, two women used by the same system, both choosing to tell the truth about it. We will not be friends. We do not need to be. We have already given each other something that does not require friendship to be real. She thought, we both looked at the same man and decided that the truth was worth more than the settlement of staying silent. That is not nothing. That is actually a great deal. That evening, she went to her mother's house, not the Whitfield estate. She had moved out the previous week Patricia's house as a temporary arrangement while the new place was being prepared. A loft in the Arts District, 4th floor, industrial windows, decent plumbing, walls not yet covered by anything except paint she had chosen herself. She went to Patricia's first. She walked through the rooms the way she had walked through them as a child. The kitchen with its worn counter, the hallway with its photographs, the particular quality of light in the afternoon in the living room, the specific way it fell through the west-facing window and pooled on the rug. She stopped at the photograph wall. There was one she always stopped at. Her gallery school graduation, 23 years old. She was looking directly at the camera with the expression of someone who has just been told the future is open and has chosen to believe it. She was wearing a blue dress she had picked herself. Her hair was the way she liked it, slightly impractical, more herself. She was entirely herself. She stood at the photograph for a long time. She said very quietly, "There you are." She meant it as recognition. She meant it as, "I see you. I have been looking for you. I did not forget you. I just misplaced you for a while." She meant it as, "I am coming back." Patricia came in from the kitchen. She stood beside her daughter and looked at the photograph. She said that was a good day. Caroline said it was. She said, "I want to have another one." Patricia said, "You will. Just you will. No qualification, no conditional. Just certainty, offered plainly, the way Patricia offered everything that mattered. My children will not grow up thinking this is normal, Caroline thought. Not Thomas. Not anyone. Not the management, the accommodation, the systematic shrinking. Not love shaped like a cage. She was going to show him something different. She was going to be something different. She already was. 3 weeks after the filing, Grant's board announced his removal as CEO, pending the FBI investigation. The stock stabilized, as Brendan had predicted, not recovered, stabilized. The public announcement carried a specific kind of credibility. The board was cooperating. The board was separating itself from his conduct. The board was, in the language of institutional management, getting ahead of it. Sylvia called at 8 in the morning. She said, "He wants to meet." Caroline said, "With his attorney." Sylvia said, "Without. He wants to speak with you directly." One conversation. "He is asking." She said asking, not demanding, not proposing as a condition, asking. She thought that is different. She sat with the request. She thought, what do I want from a final conversation with Grant Whitfield? She thought, not an apology. I do not think he has one. Not the satisfaction of seeing him diminished. He does not need to be diminished for me to be complete. She thought, I want to look at him and know that I am not afraid. That is what I want, she said. Tell him yes. My conditions, a neutral location. Sylvia is in the building. My brothers are in the building. It is recorded, and it is one conversation. Sylvia said, done. She put the phone down. She went to her closet. The loft's closet was smaller than the Whitfield estate's, but it was entirely hers. She had been filling it slowly, a few new things, chosen specifically. A pair of boots. A dress she had seen in a window and walked back to look at twice. The green sweater, clean and specific. She put on the green sweater. She took her canvas art school bag off the hook she had installed behind the door. The strap was mended. She had fixed it herself at 11 o'clock one night because she could not sleep, and fixing things felt like the right way to spend the time. She looked at herself in the mirror. She thought, this is who I am. She thought, he never met this person. He met a version of me that was being assembled for his benefit. He met the woman who qualified everything and wore cream and taupe and called his control consideration. She thought, this is who I actually am. She went to the meeting. He was already there when she arrived. He was in the conference room at Sylvia's building neutral ground, clean and institutional, smelling of coffee and paper, and nothing personal. He was sitting with his hands folded on the table. He had on a jacket she did not recognize new since the last time she had seen him. He had clearly slept. He had clearly prepared. He looked like himself. Nora had been right. He looked completely like himself. She sat across from him. She did not say his name. She let the silence be his to fill. He said, Caroline. She looked at him. He said, I am not going to ask you to forgive me. She said, good, because I have not decided if I will. That is my decision on my timeline. He looked at his hands. He said, Thomas. He stopped. He tried again. Is that the name? She said, yes. He nodded. Something moved through his face. She observed it without interpretation. She did not know if it was genuine. She did not need to know right now. He said, I want to be in his life. She said, he will know his father, a version of his father, the version that is honest about what happened and is working on being better. If that version exists, he said, and if it does not, she said, then he will know that too. And he will know that his mother told him the truth. The room was quiet. He said, what would it take? She leaned forward slightly. She said, full equitable distribution, 12% of the total estate, with Marcus Calloway's financial analysis as the basis. Public acknowledgement of the domestic violence incident, in writing, released at my choosing. Sole physical custody of Thomas with a visitation structure determined by an independent mediator, not your attorney, not mine, an independent mediator. The Whitfield name removed from the hospital wing, with a redirected donation in Thomas's name to a domestic violence organization. An ongoing cooperation with the FBI inquiry. She paused. She said, which you cannot stop regardless. He was quiet for a long time. He said, the hospital wing. She said, yes. He said, that was something I was proud of. She said, build something new to be proud of. Something clean. The silent stretch, he said, the 12%. She said, yes. He said nothing for a moment. She did not fill the silence. She had been filling his silences for 3 years. She was done filling silences that were not hers to fill. He said, okay. She said, I want it in writing. All of it, through our attorneys. Today, he said, okay. She looked at him. She thought, I am not afraid. She noted the absence the way you note the absence of a sound you have been hearing so long you forgot it was not silence. The fear was gone. She was sitting across from Grant Whitfield, the man who had slapped her, who had moved $45 million out of their marriage, who had spent 7 years building architecture to contain his money, and 3 years using her as a room in that architecture. And she was not afraid of him. She was just a person in a room with another person. She was just herself. He said, "Is there anything else?" She said, "Yes. One more thing." He waited. She said, "I want you to understand something, not for the sake of the settlement, for the sake of Thomas. I want you to understand that what you did to me is a pattern that has a name. It is called coercive control. It escalated into domestic violence. It was not an isolated incident. It was a system. And if you do not address it genuinely, with professional help, with time and work and honesty, it will happen again, with someone else. Maybe with Thomas, in ways that are subtler. And I will not allow that." She paused. She said, "I am telling you this because I think somewhere under everything, you do not want to be the person who does this. But wanting to not be something is not the same as not being it. That requires work." He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "I hear you." She did not know if he did. She could not know. That was his choice to make. She had made hers. She stood. She picked up her canvas bag. She said, "Your attorneys will hear from Sylvia this afternoon." She walked out. Brendan was in the hallway. He had not gone far. He did not say anything when she came through the door. He opened his arms. She walked into them and leaned against her oldest brother, and he held her, not a dramatic hold, just a steady, quiet, certain hold. The specific hold of someone who has been there since, before she knew what it meant to need someone to be there. She breathed. She breathed. She breathed. He said quietly, into her hair, "You did good." She said, "I know." She did not say it with pride. She said it with the specific, settled certainty of someone who has simply done the thing that needed to be done and is done now. She said it like, "Yes, I know. Now what's next?" The settlement was signed in Sylvia's conference room 3 days later. Both attorneys present. No dramatics. No speeches. A stack of papers. Reviewed, signed. Initial. Signed again. 12%. Public acknowledgement. Independent mediator. The hospital wing. The FBI investigation continued independently. He cooperated. She did not know if he would always cooperate. She did not know what kind of man he was going to choose to be from here. That was not hers to manage anymore. She signed the last page. Sylvia countersigned. Done. She sat for a moment. She thought the prison door had been unlocked all along. She thought I was my own warden. The part of me that believed his version of who I was. The part that called control consideration and called fear sensitivity and called erasure adjustment. That part was gone. She thought, I am free. Not dramatically, not with music. Just free. The way a room is different when the window is finally opened and the air moves through it. She called Patricia from the hallway. She said, "It is done." Patricia said, "Where are you?" She said, "Sylvia's office." Patricia said, "Stay there, I am bringing food." She almost laughed. She said, "Mom." Patricia said, "You need to eat. I am bringing food." Stay there. She stayed. That evening, the public acknowledgement was released. Grant's attorney and Sylvia had drafted it together. It was brief and factual and used the words domestic violence incident without qualifiers. It was released as per her condition at a time of her choosing. She chose early evening when people had time to read it properly. She did not read it online. She sat in Sylvia's conference room while Patricia read it aloud to her over the phone. Patricia read it in her precise, even voice. The way Patricia read everything as if each word deserved exactly the weight it was given. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father would have been proud of you." Caroline thought, "I know." She said out loud, "I am proud of me." She said it plainly, without apology, without the qualifier that used to arrive automatically. "I know that sounds, or maybe I should, or I do not want to, seem just, I am proud of me." It was the truest thing she had said in years. After Patricia came and they ate at the conference room table, takeout in the paper containers, the kind of meal that is also an occasion she walked back to the loft alone. It was a cool evening. Clear. The city was doing its evening things, restaurants filling, lights coming on in the buildings above her, a couple walking a dog in the particular comfortable silence of people who have been walking together for a long time. She walked. She thought about the gallery. She had found a space. Marcus had found it, actually a building 2 blocks from her loft. Ground floor, good light, reasonable lease, in a neighborhood that was becoming slowly a place where small, ambitious things happened. She had looked at it twice. She had walked through it and thought about the walls. She thought about the walls now. She thought, I know exactly what I want on them. She thought, I know exactly what kind of work I want to show. Ambitious, specific. Work that has a point of view and does not apologize for it. She thought, I have a point of view. She had always had a point of view. She had just spent 3 years not expressing it. She stopped on a corner and looked up. The sky was the specific gray-blue of early evening and late autumn. A color she had tried to paint once, years ago, and found impossible to capture. It was never quite the right gray. It was never quite the right blue. It was always both and neither, like most real things. She thought, I want to find someone who can paint that. She thought, that is literally my job now. She almost laughed again. She felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt like herself. Entirely specifically, practically herself, standing on a corner in the evening thinking about the color of the sky and how to find someone who could paint it. She walked home. She climbed the 4 flights to the loft. She could see why the rent was reasonable. The elevator was inconsistent, and she opened the door and turned on the light and looked at her apartment. Her things were here. The green sweater on the hook, the sketchbook on the table. Thomas's books already stacked on the shelf she had put together herself with a screwdriver and some patience and Marcus's detailed instructions via text. The Vermeer print she had ordered the week after she moved in the specific yellow she loved, in the specific frame she chose. Her apartment, her walls, her life, beginning. She sat at the table, she opened the sketchbook. She drew the corner of the building she could see from her window, the way the stone caught the evening light. She had been meaning to draw it since the first day. She drew. She did not stop until the light outside had fully changed and she needed to turn on the lamp. She turned on the lamp. She kept drawing. She thought, there you are. He arrived at 4:47 in the morning. Not quietly. Nothing about Thomas was quiet, even in this. He arrived with the particular insistence of someone who has decided it is time and sees no reason to wait. Caroline had woken at 2 with the kind of certainty that does not require confirmation. She had called Patricia, who had called Derek, who had driven her to the hospital with the specific calm of a man who has been in considerably more alarming situations and knows his calm is the most useful thing he can offer. Dr. Marsh was there by 3. By 4:47, Thomas Calloway Whitfield was in the world. 7 pounds and 4 ounces. Gray-green eyes that the nurses said were unusual. He was serious and alert from the first moment, looking around the room with the focused attention of someone taking inventory. She watched him doing it. She thought, yes, that is exactly right. That is exactly who you are. She held him. He was warm and specific and entirely new. He smelled like something she did not have a word for, clean in particular. The smell of a person arriving. She looked at him. He looked at her. She thought, I know you. I have known you for 8 months, and I know you already. You are going to be exactly yourself. Insistent and attentive and entirely unwilling to be smaller than you are. She thought, good. She said, hello, Thomas. He blinked. Slow, deliberate. Taking her in, she said, I have been waiting for you. And there is so much I want to show you. She held him. She felt something settle not just in her body, though there was that. The specific settling of a body that has been carrying something enormous and is now holding it instead of containing it, but somewhere deeper. Something that had been waiting to settle for a very long time. She was complete in this room. Not fixed, not resolved, not finished with difficulty. Just complete the way a thing is complete when it is in its right place doing its right thing. She was his mother. She was entirely herself. Both things at once, fully. Patricia was in the waiting room. Derek, who had waited through everything, was in the waiting room. Brendan and Marcus had arrived at 5, driving through the early dark, and were also in the waiting room. She knew they were there. She could feel them the way she had felt them her whole life, present, certain, hers. Grant had been notified. He had sent flowers and a brief message through his attorney. Appropriate, without the demand for presence or acknowledgement. She did not know what he was going to be as a father. She hoped he would do the work he needed to do. She held that hope without attaching her well-being to it. Thomas blinked again. He made a sound, small, exploratory. Not crying, just registering, she said. I know. It is a lot. It gets better. She rocked him. She thought about the rocking chair in the nursery she had built. The chair she had sat in alone, in the middle of everything falling apart, and found that it held her too. She thought, I am going to take that chair. It was one of the things she had asked for in the settlement. A few specific things. The bench from the entry hall, the rocking chair, her sketchbooks, a particular painting she had bought before the marriage, the first major purchase of her own career, a large abstract work in 3 colors that Grant had never understood and she had loved completely. They were already at the loft. They were already home. Sylvia called at 6 in the morning. She apologized for the hour. She said, the settlement is finalized, all conditions met, signed and filed. Caroline said, thank you. Sylvia said, do not thank me yet. You still have the rest of your life to live. She said, I know. She said, I am looking forward to it. She put the phone down. She looked at Thomas. He was asleep. Already, at 6 in the morning on his first day, he had decided it was time to sleep. She thought, you are going to have opinions about everything. You are going to be completely yourself about everything. She thought, I love you so much, I do not have the right words for it. She thought, I am going to spend the rest of my life finding the words. She held him. The room was quiet, hospital quiet, the specific hum of it, the distant sound of the ward, the particular quality of early morning light through institutional blinds. She held her son. She breathed. She thought, 12% of $800 million. She thought the gallery. She thought the Vermeer in Amsterdam. She thought the sketchbook on the table in the loft. She thought the corner of the building in the evening light. She thought the things she was going to show him, the artists no one had found yet, the work that needed someone to say, this is important, this matters, you should see this. She thought that is my job. She thought that is who I am. She held her son, and the morning came in through the blinds, and somewhere in the waiting room her brothers and her mother were drinking bad hospital coffee and waiting for news that had already been given, and she was here, in this room, beginning. 3 months later. Thomas was awake at 5 in the morning because Thomas was always awake at 5 in the morning. This was simply a fact of life now. She had adjusted. She had discovered that 5 in the morning, when you were not in it involuntarily, when you were in it because a small, particular person had opinions about when the day should begin, 5 in the morning was actually quite beautiful. She picked him up. He was warm and solid and pleased to see her. He registered her face the way he registered everything, with serious, focused attention, his gray-green eyes moving across her features like he was confirming a fact he already knew. She said, "Good morning." He made his sound, the small exploratory one, the one that meant, yes, I am here. I have confirmed this. Let us proceed. She carried him to the window, the east-facing window, the one she had been standing at every morning for the past 3 months. Not because she chose it deliberately, not as a ritual, just because she was up and Thomas was up and the light was good here and she had found herself returning to it. The loft was quiet. The gallery was not yet open 4 more weeks, the builder had said, and she had said 3, and they had settled on 3.5, which was how most negotiations went. She had learned this. She had learned a great deal about negotiations in the last 3 months. The walls of the loft were covered now. Not completely, not cluttered, but covered in the way a space is covered when someone has been living in it deliberately. Things chosen and placed and moved and reconsidered and placed again. The Vermeer print in its frame. 3 photographs from her old portfolio exhibition she had installed, rooms she had arranged, a small study framed that she had drawn in the first week of living here, the corner of the building across the street. A drawing Thomas had participated in, his hand guided by hers, dragging a marker across paper at 3 months old, which was not art but was also perhaps art. She had not decided. She stood at the window. The sky was doing what it did. Dark blue, deepening toward the particular gray that comes just before the light. She had tried 3 times to describe this color in her sketchbook and had not succeeded, and was beginning to think the failure was the point. Some things did not reduce. Some things had to be experienced directly. Thomas pressed his hand against the glass, flat palm, small fingers. He looked at the sky with his serious face. She thought, you are going to be a person who pays attention. You are going to be a person who looks at things properly and takes the time to really see them. She thought, you got that from me. She put her own hand beside his on the glass, her palm next to his palm. Different sizes, the same impulse. They watched the sky together. She thought about the beginning. She thought about the drawing room doorway, the way she had stood there and not breathed, the way her hands had gone to her belly before her face, the way the silence after had been enormous. She thought about the hallway, the bench, Marcus's hand over hers. She thought about the bath she had finally run, the water she had been told not to use, the steam. She thought about the green sweater. She thought about the cereal from the box at midnight, alone at the kitchen table, Thomas pressing against her ribs, the drawer of her mind very full of things she had named wrong. She thought about Brendan's voice. Say that again, slowly. She thought about signing the last page in Sylvia's conference room, the stack of paper, the pen moving, done. She thought about Dr. Marsh saying, I want you to know that I see it. She thought about the email to the gallery, sent at midnight, replied to by noon. The director saying, we wondered where you went. She thought about the graduation photograph in her mother's hallway, the blue dress, the specific certainty of 23, she thought. There you are. She looked at the window, at her hand beside her son's hand, both of them watching the light arrive. She thought the prison door had been unlocked all along. She thought I was my own warden, the part of me that believed his version, the part that called management love and called love management and got them confused for 3 years until the confusion became a habit and the habit became a life. She thought, that part is gone. She thought, and here I am. The sky began to change. The gray before the light, that impossible gray-blue she had been trying to describe, began to resolve, not into one color, into the specific complexity of actual light arriving, which was never one thing, which was always argument and negotiation and compromise between colors that did not want to merge. Like most real things, Thomas made his sound. She said, I know, right? She looked at his hand on the glass, the way the light arriving touched his fingers, the way his fingers were so completely his small and certain and already themselves. She thought about the gallery. She thought about the artist she had called last week, a woman in her 50s who made enormous abstract paintings in colors that argued with each other. A woman whose work she had loved for years and had tracked down, finally, because she was a person who did things now, who did not postpone. She had called her and said, I have a gallery. I am opening it in 3 weeks. I want your work on the walls. I want to show people what you have been doing. The artist had been quiet for a moment. Then she had said, I have been waiting for someone to call. Caroline had said, I know. I am sorry it took this long. The artist had said, you are here now. She thought, yes, she was here now. The light came. That specific gold, not Vermeer yellow, but close or adjacent or in the family of it. The light that hit the east-facing wall of the building across from her and bounced back into her window and arrived at her hands and her son's hands on the glass. Thomas pushed his palm flat against it. The warmth of it. She did the same. She felt the glass, and through the glass the city, and through the city everything she was going to do and be and build and show and find and make. She thought, whatever comes next. She said it aloud quietly into the morning and the light and the particular gray-green eyes of her son, who was already looking at the next thing with complete focused attention. Whatever comes next, she meant it as a given. She meant it as the simplest truth she knew. She was ready for it. She was ready. The light came in through the window she had always ignored. It filled the room. It filled the room completely.